What if I told you there's a secret investment account that not only saves you money on taxes, but can grow your wealth over time, even covering healthcare expenses in retirement? It's not a 401k, it's not a Roth IRA, and most people have never even thought about it. Let's talk about the HSA, the best kept secret in investing. Starting off with the long list of pros for a health savings account is the triple tax advantage. First off, our pre-tax contribution, so you get to save on taxes by putting money into your HSA account before taxes are ever paid through your paycheck. This is great because it lowers your taxable income for the entire year so that the IRS doesn't see how much you really make, and that money gets put into your investment account. Next is tax-free growth, so all the money that gets put into your HSA account gets to grow in the investments within the account fully tax-free, as long as it's used for qualified medical expenses, which is the third advantage in the triple tax advantage account with an HSA. And if you're wondering what a qualified medical expense is, there is a massive list on irs.gov, which I'm also going to link below if you want to check out the list yourself. When I was scrolling through the list myself, some of the ones that popped out to me were things like contact lenses, dental treatment, pregnancy test kits, and transplants. There's also a list of unqualified medical expenses, so make sure you check out that full list on irs.gov before you just go buy something with your HSA debit card and then get penalized for it. Speaking of debit cards, that's the second pro of an HSA account. You can often pay for all of your medical expenses by tying directly to your account through an HSA debit card that your provider gives you. So if you were to go to the dentist, for example, and that counted as a qualified medical expense, instead of using your own personal checking account, you can pull out your HSA debit card and it's going to use the funds that are already in your HSA account to pay for that medical expense. And the nice thing is that most HSA accounts will automatically sell a portion of your investments to cover whichever charge that you just swiped with. So you don't have to manually log into your account, sell investments, and then have that cash ready for qualified medical expenses. You can just spend your debit card as is. The next benefit is post age 65 flexibility. So after the age of 65, you can use all the funds in your HSA account for non-medical expenses without the 20% penalty, although you will still pay income tax. So this makes an HSA similar to a traditional IRA with the added flexibility of paying for medical expenses until you're age 65. Another cool benefit is employer contributions if they have that at your job. So your employer may also contribute funds into your HSA to match whatever you put in there, like a mini 401k. For example, if you put in $100 every single paycheck, they might match it with $66 for a total of $166 until your employer hits a limit of, let's say, $1,000. That's a pretty sweet deal because you're basically getting $1,000 for free every single year just for putting money into your account. And all that free money gets to grow as an investment. Next up is that an HSA is very portable. So when you leave your job, it doesn't stay with that company. You don't lose out all that money. That HSA account gets to come with you. Now, there are some restrictions to this, so although you can't add more funds to it once you leave a job, the money can at least stay in the account and continue to grow with the investments that you've already bought with it. And you basically have a couple choices with this. Number one is that you could leave the money alone and let it grow in your investments. Or number two, if you get a new job that also offers an HSA with a high deductible plan, you can roll over all those HSA funds into your new HSA via direct transfer. Now, this is usually the recommended path forward because you don't have to handle the funds manually and there's no penalties or taxes or anything like that. But if you don't want to do it that way, you can do an indirect transfer once every 12 months. And if you don't do it within 60 days, that's where you're going to get penalty and taxes, so keep that in mind. Another benefit is that an HSA is so much better than a flexible spending account or an FSA, because an FSA is essentially use it or lose it. So if you were to put $500 into your FSA account at your job and then you didn't use that money for any medical expenses throughout the year, at the end of the year, you lose all that money. But with an HSA, you get to keep that money every single year and it gets to grow over time. You also get catch-up contributions. So after the age of 65, whatever the limit is for that year, you can add $1,000 to it. So for example, this year in 2025, I believe the limit for individuals is $4,350. So if you were 55 or over, you could add $1,000 to that. Also, there's no minimum required distribution for an HSA. So if you turn 73, with your IRA and your 401k, you have to take out a certain amount of money legally. With an HSA, you don't have to do that. You can fully leave the money in there and just let it grow and compound. And my favorite part is the flexible investment options you have within your HSA account. So many providers offer a range of investment types that you can choose between mutual funds, ETFs, or even individual stocks. So you basically get to tailor your entire investment strategy within this account. Although my strategy is often to stick with the lowest fee and highest return ETFs that I can find, something like a basic S&P 500 index fund or ETF is a really good start. And for a final bonus tip for the pros of a health savings account, you actually don't have to use any of the funds for medical expenses, and you can treat it like an extra retirement account. Now, why would you do this when the money's there and it's for medical expenses, right? Well, think about it this way. If you have extra cash in your checking account, or say you make a good salary, good enough to cover your medical expenses, and you're young and healthy, so you don't necessarily have big medical expenses, what you can do is continue to max out your HSA account, which is again triple tax advantage, and it continues to invest. And you can continue to let that money compound over time until you have enough money in there for the interest itself to cover almost all your medical expenses. So for instance, let's say you maxed out your account every year for 10 years and it grew enough to be $100,000. At a basic 10% return or even a 5% return, that's $5,000 of interest you're getting paid in your HSA account every single year. And if your medical expenses are less than $5,000 generally every year, that's what I mean by you getting free healthcare, because your $5,000 that you're earning in interest is covering all your expenses or more. Plus you have a huge nest egg if there's ever a massive medical expense that comes into your life. So there's plenty of ways to use your HSA, and you can certainly use the funds in there for medical expenses if you don't want to use that bonus tip that I just mentioned. But keep that in mind if you have some extra cash laying around, you're young, you're healthy, you don't really have high medical expenses, use that as an extra retirement account and you will thank yourself later. Now let's move on to the cons of a health savings account, which there's not as many as pros. Now first up is the penalty for using it for non-medical expenses before the age of 65. And the penalty is 20%. So for example, if you pulled out $1,000 for some cosmetic surgery that didn't count as a qualified medical expense, you're going to pay income tax and the 20% penalty fee. So the 20% is going to be $200. And then let's say you're in the 24% tax bracket, so that's $240 as well. Combine that together, that's a total of $440 on top of the $1,000 that you took out for that surgery, for a total of $1,440. So again, make sure you check that list of qualified medical expenses before you spend that money. Another con is the contribution limits to these accounts. So for 2025, I believe earlier I said it's $4,350. I actually misspoke. It's $4,300 for 2025 for individuals and $8,550 for families. Now this also includes any employer contributions that you have. So for example, if you put in $3,300 and your employer matched up to $1,000, that covers your maximum of $4,300. And if you go over that, you may have to pay some penalties, so keep that in mind. And this is only on the cons because it's a bummer that you can't put more money in there. You also have to have a high deductible health plan in order to get an HSA, which can be expensive for people that don't have any extra cash to meet that deductible, or if you expect to have a lot of really big medical bills in the upcoming year, an HSA may not be able to fit your situation. So for example, the deductible could be $3,500. And if you spend less than that in total in medical expenses and you don't have extra cash and you're not young and healthy, it may not be a good choice to choose the HSA. But generally, if you're young and you're healthy and fit and you don't expect to have high medical expenses in the year and you have some extra cash to put away, it might be good to choose an HSA. Another negative that's not really a con of the account itself is its underutilized investment potential. Less than 20% of people who put money in their HSAs actually know that they can invest the money within it. So here's your reminder to go check out the money within your HSA account and make sure that it's not just sitting idle. The last thing you want to do is spend the next 40 years putting money into the account, not investing it, and you miss out on something like 6 or 7 figures within that account that could cover medical expenses and more throughout your retirement. Another thing to think about is the administration fees. Some HSAs charge maintenance or investment fees, which can really eat into your returns over time, so make sure that you check this out as well. Another thing to keep in mind is record keeping. If you plan to reimburse your medical expenses later on, as opposed to just paying for your HSA debit card directly, you'll need to maintain detailed records of everything you spent, which can be very tedious, and if you forget them or lose them or mess up, that can be a problem, so keep that in mind as well. Another small negative is that some HSA accounts require investment thresholds, so you have to have a certain amount of money in the account itself before you can start investing, which potentially limits your investment growth, but really I wouldn't worry about it if you have a long-term plan in mind. Now there's a few legal and tax considerations to keep in mind with your HSA, and one of them is state tax. So most states allow tax-deductible contributions. Now there are 2 states that do this. One of them is New Jersey and the other one is California. Of course, they do not allow state tax benefits for contributions or earnings. As far as penalty exceptions go, remember it has a 20% penalty fee if you use it for non-qualified medical expenses before the age of 65. That fee is waived in the case of disability or death, which makes sense because if you're dead, you don't really need medical bills. Something else to consider is Medicare premiums. So after the age of 65, when you hop on Medicare, you can actually use the funds within your account to pay for Medicare premiums. And this can be a huge retirement advantage because Fidelity recommends that people have something like $165,000 to cover all your medical expenses. So if you've been contributing the max amount for your HSA for years and investing it at a decent rate, you most likely have a lot more than $165,000, and all that money can cover Medicare premiums, which is again kind of like free healthcare. So what do you do with all this information, and what are some actions actionable steps that you can take. Number 1, you can check if your employer offers an HSA. 2, if you're young, healthy, and not really worried about a high deductible, sign up as soon as you can, which will most likely be at your next open enrollment. Number 3, max out contributions every single year. 4 is to invest within the account. Don't forget that part, in low-cost ETFs that will compound over time. And 5, if you really want to optimize this whole thing, pay cash for all your medical expenses. Let all of your investments grow until your HSA gets big enough to cover all of your medical expenses. Now, I'll leave links to all the sources that I use to get this information about HSAs if you want to check them out and read them yourself. But if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos on money and investing. That's it for today. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.